Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Season 5, Episode 7.
Welcome back, friends. Today we took a drive over to Hudson, Wisconsin for arguably our hoppiest episode so far. I'm a dad, so I use that. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm a bit of a beer lover. I like all kinds, stouts, lagers. Sours are actually my favorite, even though a lot of people don't like them. Right now I'm sitting with a couple of guests at their very own brewery. Welcome to the show, owners of Hop Barrel Brewing, Brian and Justin.
Hey,
good morning.
Good to be here, man.
Dude, yeah, thanks for letting me into your sweet little spot here. How long have you guys been here?
Well, we've been here a little over 3 years and been here about 3.5 now. Yeah.
This was the first and only location, right? Of this spot?
Yes. Yep.
This is it.
Cool. So each of you take turns. I don't care who goes first. You can fight about it. But who are you and what are you passionate about?
Oh, I am Brian. I am passionate. I got to excuse me. I got a chance to look at these questions beforehand, so I have done some thinking about it. And I thought that I think when we started this, I was very much passionate about creating beer and how that all worked. But as we've kind of gone on here, I think my passion and sort of, I guess, our mutual obsession is just like running this business, which is like 3 little businesses within a business.
Yeah, I totally agree, actually. I think the thing that drew us together and got us started was actually brewing itself and beer. And it's not necessarily that a passion for beer has gone away.
No.
But how we approach it and how we exhibit that passion has definitely moved more from the actual brewing. For me, I'd say it's a little bit more into the sales and communicating about our beer and talking to people. But overall, it's much more running this kind of monstrosity that makes the beer, packages it, sells it, and then has this front house for people to come in and try it. And they're very different, even though there's this common thread between what we do.
Yeah, we have seriously like the coolest jobs. So it's always something different, and there's a lot of running around and a lot of like, changes happening constantly around us, and adapting and shifting and just figuring everything out is very exciting. And fun.
That's what entrepreneurship is, right?
Yeah.
You're creators ultimately. Like, and I have talked with a lot of like creative entrepreneurs, and whether it's like music or anything else, you're just creating. And when you create and you work for yourself, you're not in one department, you're in all departments. And like, you kind of got to figure out where do you want to put your time and energy in today. And that's the beautiful part is like, if you don't want to do anything anymore, like on one particular avenue, you can hire somebody and then put your energy into some other area.
That's
you know what I mean?
Literally exactly what we do. Yeah.
It's controlled chaos, but
Yeah.
it lets you kind of have that constant creative streak of what needs the attention now and what you want to focus on and what needs a little love.
You're gonna hear some noises in the background too. So
No, it's totally fine.
it's a brewery. It's always like it's the noise that you're not familiar with that you should be concerned about.
Sure. I was on a rooftop recording a little while ago, and there was an ambulance that went by, and I was like, I need to pause. No, we'll just like power through.
I like that that aspect of it. Actually.
It makes it sound more real.
Yeah, like we do like the beer opening. I like to put the beer can by the mic. I like that sound.
There's a podcast I listen to that does that. That's like their sponsored thing. Is they always crack one at the beginning. So, anyways, getting further on. So, how can people best follow you and contact you, whether it's personally or through like the brewery? Is it contact forms on the website? Like, if you're gonna plug, this is how to follow you and contact you. What are you gonna do?
I'd say Instagram is what we watch the most. You can reach out to us on any social media, maybe not Twitter.
Yeah, we don't really pay attention to Twitter, I don't think.
But Instagram's where we're going to be the most responsive and engage and get messages back if people want to get in touch.
Yeah, personally, it's I_know_Brian is my Instagram handle. And I guess that's kind of, a weird story, but people walk into the brewery all the time and they're like, well, I know Brian. And the people that work behind the bar and the tap room are like, yeah, everybody knows Brian, haha. And so I changed to that, just a tongue in cheek.
Yeah, that's how people try to get free beer, right?
Totally.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. So what's the brief summary of life for each of you before Hop Barrel?
Well, I was a lawyer for 10 years in the Twin Cities. Did business and kind of mostly family law, but it was a small kind of East Side St. Paul firm that did a little bit of everything. So dealt a lot with business and entrepreneurs, good people at bad times in their life is how I kind of like to describe it. But that was a daunting 10 years. But
So you still had a soul, though.
well, I came out of it with something that I was able to salvage, I guess, is the way to
He seriously is a very different dude than 3.5 years ago when I only knew him wearing a suit and tie. And then, he sort of like loosened up and started, he's
Lumberjack flannels now.
right.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he kind of morphed, and he one day had told me I took all of my suits and put them in the like closet at home that we don't put the clothes we don't look at anymore. And I was like, that's great, man. Like,
But I went from like 2 versions of Batman. Instead of like all
Yeah.
black suit, now it's all different colored flannels.
right.
Yeah, no,
Few
I got
cards.
I did some similar. I worked in jewelry for a while, so I had to wear suits every day. And I made a conscious effort when I opened my store, because I own a skateboard shop, right? That's like where everything started for me. That was in 2014. When I opened that, I specifically donated all of them. I didn't even keep one for occasions. I got rid of all of them. And now my ex-wife, but my wife at the time was like, what are you doing? Why would you get rid of all of them? And I said, well, because I don't have to change myself to impress anyone anymore. And I don't want to do that ever again. If you don't like me, fine. I mean, granted, now there's been events where I'm like, maybe I should have kept one suit, but I did the same thing. And now, like, although I'm wearing a black t-shirt today, I wear Hawaiian shirts pretty much every day. Like, that's my new uniform.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So anyway, so lawyers, what else did you do besides doing that? What else like led you to beer?
I mean, a boring trip to Florida. Joking.
Yeah, that's a good.
No,
story.
it was actually kind of a lawyer event. I did a fundraiser, or helped with a fundraiser in Hudson here with a local civic group, and we contacted a bunch of local breweries. And it was weird story. It was when the brewery I used to work at was first opening, and they came in and helped out, and I kind of that was my first big exposure to craft beer. A few months later, I started home brewing. Then I started doing contests and doing pretty well, and that's kind of how Brian and I met. He was at the local brewery, and I'd bring things by for him to sample and get his opinion on. And
he used to get bummed out though, because he'd bring these beers and he'd be like, well, what do you think? What would you change? And I'm like, nothing. It tastes great. That's the same thing I read on a judging sheet. It's like, well, this isn't to style, so I have to ding you for this, but it's a great beer. Don't change the recipe.
Sure.
And
So he's like,
I was
what would you change?
in a line of work where I was used to people always hating everything and giving critiques. So I'm like, oh, he just doesn't want to give me his time.
No.
So anyway, we hung out there for a couple years, and then you can tell that part of the story better, but
Sure.
you ended up going to another brewery, and we kind of
Uh-huh.
got out of touch, but we reconnected and kind of had this idea of starting something. And then that becomes its own.
That's
Monster.
own whole deal. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's hear your backstory.
Oh, okay. So I don't know. I have such a weird. I always bring up these jobs that I've had over the years. I think I've had like every job.
Dude, the same.
You
I
know?
I even worked at a hot dog stand outside of a bar
Yeah,
at
see,
one point.
Like, I was a puppeteer on a puppet wagon when I was 18. You would
First
drive
time I've
this
heard that one.
truck. I know, right? You would drive this truck around, and it had a little playhouse that was attached, and the window would open, and you would like do these puppet shows for kids at parks. And it was like $10 an hour in the year 2000, and I was like, man, I'm balling. $10 an hour. All I got to do is this puppet show. And then I painted fire hydrants after that, and I don't know, all kinds of weird stuff. But kind of got into warehousing. But then in 2005, this engineer named Bruce Truckee, he dragged all this homebrew equipment over to like the house I was living at the time, and we brewed this beer, and I was just like blown away at you made all your own stuff. Like you would cut the copper, and you would run the pipes, and you would drill holes and like cobble all this stuff together. And I think that's what sort of drew me to it, was like making stuff. Excuse me. And then I kind of got into the art and the craft of it, and actually doing it. And you go to, when you have a hobby like that, or like you're a creator and that, like you go to great lengths to do what you need to do. And so I end up at this apartment in Uptown where I have to drag all this stuff up an entire floor and out into a garage to brew. And it was just a giant pain in the ass, and brewing on the hottest day of the year, the coldest day of the year. So long story short, got into brewing, and then got laid off in like 2009 or whatever, like everyone else did. And when the economy crashed, and I went back to bartending and thought, seriously, I'm going to make a run at being a brewer. And then by the time like maybe 2012 rolled around, I had my first job at a brewery and just sort of worked my way up from, I literally remember mopping the floor, looking at the tanks and being like, someday, dude, someday. And here we are. So, but went to that brewery. That brewery got sold. So on like Friday I was working in Hudson, and then on Monday I was working in Minnetonka, which is really, really far away. It's at the western side of the cities.
Yep.
And then that brewery, it was contract brewing for like 3 or 4 different breweries in that brewery, which then led us to sell some equipment to a brewery in Guatemala. And then I ended up starting this brewery in Guatemala. And then we started the brewery inbound in Minneapolis. So I've technically built 3 breweries at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got back from Guatemala, he hit me up and was like, and this was 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago.
It was November. Four years ago.
4 years, 5 years, something like that. And he hit me up and wanted to do this brewery. And I was like, you're nuts. Like, everybody's making a brewery right now. Like, why would you want to do that? And then I kind of saw how he operates, and I was like, okay, I think this could probably work. So I don't know if that doesn't really bring us to current, but yeah, I've had every job, but mostly just doing breweries.
So you're the creative one that was brewing beer, and then all of a sudden he comes in with his suit and he's like, look, I can help you make money. Let's do this.
Yeah.
But no, he was making beer too. So what was it about each other? Because I can't do it. I can't, I've had people approach me about doing different partnerships and stuff. And I do partnerships, sure. But I work for myself. That's it. I cannot have a partner. It just doesn't work that way because I'm always going 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I can't depend on somebody else. I struggle with that.
That's him.
Yeah. What is it about each other that you were like, okay, I'm going to do this huge investment such as a brewery. I'm just going to trust that I'm going to be able to work with this person for the next decade. What was it about each other that you were cool with that?
I think we'd known each other. Not that we were really that close personal friends, but we'd kind of had that time to get to know each other and see how we operated and what we were interested in. And it's just, this is such a big thing for one person to take on anyway. I mean, we're still, every brewery is a little different, but I'm still shocked at how small our core ownership is compared to a lot of other breweries. Usually it's a board or it's a massive group of people. And I think it gives us a lot more flexibility. I know it doesn't really answer your question, but I don't know. I think our skill sets just really complement each other.
Yeah, we are just totally yin and yang.
It's not like there's not times where we get on each other's nerves, but we just learn the skills to deal with it. And there's so many different things. I think what I was getting at is we're usually caught up in very different projects, and not like we're doing the same thing at the same time, wasting time on that. It's always just other people handling things.
Right.
I think it's really hard to stay mad at Justin. And hopefully it's hard to stay mad at me, but
yeah.
So explain the timeline better. Well, for one, who else is involved in ownership then? Is it just the two of you? Who all is involved? It's just the two of you.
Yeah.
How many people work for Hop Barrel as of the moment? How big is the company
9.
as far as that goes?
9. Yeah.
9 total.
Counting us.
Yeah.
Cool.
We've had a lot more than that, but had sort of figured out a way to really streamline that because
we were new, and I think we're figuring things out, efficiencies, and
Well, the thing is, if you can have less people doing the same job, theoretically you can also pay them more, and it's better for everybody because then they're more personally invested. They feel like they have ownership because they're part of such a small crew. I think that's the way better way to do it, anyways.
Yeah.
So to fill in the blanks for when we get to where Hop Barrel came, right? So you made beer, you were a lawyer, so you understood paperwork a little bit better probably, but you had more background in beer itself. Where, fill in the gap from when he came and said, hey, I want to do a brewery until opening day, how the name came about, where you guys kind of went through that process.
So we were, by the time I even started talking to you, I had a rough business plan together because I threw that at you to look at and kind of came to you, not so much. It was more of a consulting thing. I mean, I knew I wanted to get you on board, but it was a soft pitch to try to.
He had to. I actually more or less just told him no. I'll just consult for you. And then after we kind of got more and more into the planning, I got more comfortable with the idea of jumping on to something that at the time was just a total unknown. I don't know. There's a ton of breweries opening. A lot of them are some of them are failing. It's
So in that time frame, it was a lot of. What we were meeting a couple times a month, usually grabbing lunch or having a couple beers late at night or something like that, and looking at, different business plans or talking about this specific thing or equipment. I mean, there's a lot of different facets to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was designing the equipment, getting in touch with the manufacturer, finding the building. So I think we were trying to build a building somewhere.
Yeah, so this was the original plan was we were looking like a lot of breweries do it, finding a warehouse or something outside of the area. We knew we wanted to be around
here.
Hudson, St. Croix area, that's for sure. But our plan was to build. So I wish I could remember the year. It was 2000, it was 17.
It was 17.
So this would have been 16?
16, yeah.
So it was November of then, and then this building suddenly became available. There was a winery here that didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, there was a city councilman who I used to know from the east side. He was a business guy over there, and we were in some networking groups together. And he reached out to us and was like, you guys got to check this place out. I know I talked to him about we were planning on doing a brewery, and he kind of introduced us to the owners, and we met with them mid-January. And
well, yeah, I mean, and then for the listeners, like this is on like the main street in this little small town in northwestern Wisconsin. So it's a prime location, and it's a really cool building.
Yeah, it's very visible, and it's like full of these huge windows right on the street, so
Yeah,
everyone
this
can see what's
used to be
going
a
on.
car dealership.
Yeah, we're sitting
so-
on a showroom floor.
Oh,
So we had
sure.
an old timer came in here and had this like little misty-eyed thing going on and said, I bought a 1969 GTO off the floor and like
Sure.
right here. And we were like,
Sure.
oh, that's cool.
But yeah, it was a lot of that planning. The building site kind of actually rushed our plans because we were
Yeah, we
thinking
had
like
to
a
throw it
year
into
out.
gear.
So that
quickly.
is really how the planning started. We worked with a branding company, Brand Yourself, who we still do some. They did marketing for us for a while and still do some website work.
Are they like local, or who? I don't
They're
know.
out in
I'm not
Northfield.
familiar with them.
They're out in Northfield.
Northfield.
Okay, cool.
They do a couple breweries and a bunch of other projects. But they worked with us to try to work on like colors and naming. My wife actually came up with the name.
Yeah,
Naming
yeah.
a brewery and beer is very hard.
She
Everything's
just,
taken.
oh my God, every name's taken. She asked him, what kind of beers are you guys going to make? And he said hoppy stuff and barrel aged stuff. And she's like, well, what about hop and barrel? And we were like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, names are really hard to
Oh
come
my
up
God.
with, right? Because it's like that's the thing people are going to call you forever. And when I came up with like seriously, Passion Board Shop for me was just like a working title because I'm like I can't think of anything. I'm passionate about it, but that sounds so cheesy, and I hated it, and I couldn't come up with anything else. And then over time, people are like, "Oh, I love it, so easy." And now I've like kind of came to love what I thought was like kind of lame at first,
Yeah.
and it just like kind of worked. But like it's difficult to do that. And so that agency they did the whole branding then.
Yeah.
For you
Yeah,
guys.
yep. And that's how I feel about the color green.
That's
exactly.
exactly like
Yeah.
when we saw the green, I was kind of like, and now I'm like, no, everything must be green. Like,
Well, and it's important for it to be recognizable, right? Instantly
Yeah.
recognizable. So
Yeah.
that's why when you see logos and stuff, it's not supposed to be intricate.
Mhm.
It's
Well-
just supposed to be like something that looks cool. It's aesthetically pleasing, but people see it.
I live in Somerset, and to most of the kids there, Hop and Barrel Green is now an actual color. Like multiple
Whoa.
people are like that's so ingrained in some of the and people think we have multiple trucks, but we
well,
just drive
and
around
then
enough that
it's Wisconsin, so the children run after the beer truck, not the ice cream truck.
they do. Yeah.
Do you guys also give away free beer and then play like tunes over it when you drive around?
All
You have a
the
little
time.
speaker?
Oh.
Yeah, it's mostly rap music. No, just
Oh.
kidding.
Perfect. So when you guys, I'm still interested in this because yes, like you get together and you talk about a
Oh,
plan,
yeah.
but realistically, like what did that actually look like? Did you guys set up a meeting where you're like, okay, let's actually talk about this and show up with notepad and paper and say, look, this is the role I want to take. This is the role that you could take. This is what I bring. This is what
Yeah.
you bring.
Yeah, all of that.
There was a handful of those meetings, but there's one distinct one that sticks out to me. We took a whole day and we went to was it Ward 6? It's closed
6.
now.
Yeah, it was a breakfast place.
Yep, in the
I
Payne
love
Phelan
breakfast
neighborhood.
food.
It was an awesome tap selection. Prize was one of the big beers. They sold a lot of there. So this,
Yeah, I used to brew a lot of prize brewing.
but it was an awesome, cool breakfast spot in the east side. So we went there, took a booth, and just ordered nonstop coffee for like 6 hours.
Mhm.
And then this was at the point where it's like we knew we were on board. We'd had kind of the branding. We were trying to figure out equipment and exactly what you said, those roles. So it was pen and paper sitting there. Well, I mean, I'm an iPad guy, so whatever.
Yeah, there's an app that like we're crazy
God.
planners, and so there's like this app called Trello, and it was just card after card after card, like just to infinitum. And I think that's still active, and I was kind of poking through it the other day
Yeah,
to see all
It's a
that.
project organization tool that we
Yeah.
lived off of for a year.
But we were sitting at that breakfast place, and I think I said we instead of you like a couple times, and he kind of went like, I
But
was
yeah,
like, okay, it's a we now.
But we took the whole day, kind of planned out a lot of that. Went to I was gonna say Badger Hill, Bad Weather,
Yeah,
because
that's my
it's-
favorite brewery. It's Bad Weather.
Yeah, and
Where's that out of?
St. Paul.
Okay.
Yeah,
and they were friends of ours, and our brew house is modeled kind of after theirs with tweaks to make
Yeah,
it
I
our
copied a
own.
lot of stuff Andy did.
Well, his was copied on one before. I mean, that's
true.
That's how a lot of these breweries
Yeah.
are.
Oh, that's everything creative.
Yeah.
If you think that you came up with something totally
Yeah,
out
no,
there,
no.
like no, you pulled from somewhere. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe the people, if you're good at it, hopefully nobody sees exactly where you like pulled from, but like you pulled from something.
I don't know. Give credit where it's due. It was a good
Well,
idea.
oh, totally,
Yeah.
totally, yeah, for sure. But I'm just saying, as far as like, you want to take things that inspire you and then put your own twist on them. You know what I mean? But it's fun, and it is important to give credit, right? When people go, "Oh, like where'd you find that?" You're like, "Well, I did my own thing, but this is where it came from." And it's cool sometimes when it's like something obscure. You know what I mean? Because that's a lot of times like where
It's
things come
funny too when you like do kind of copy or rip someone off and it just totally flops. And you're like, oh, shit.
Well, yeah, you got to do your own thing. You got
Yeah.
to find, you got to find your own voice, and over time, like that develops more and more.
Mhm.
When you're in that meeting, right?
Yeah.
What were this, and things change, right? So this may not be where it is now, but in that meeting where you guys are like, this is what we're doing, who had what roles without going into crazy, like who was in charge of what, right? And what was it like? Why do you think that creating a brewery when there's like a billion of them, why was it that it's like, okay, me and you can do this? What is unique about it? Why do you think it was going to work?
Well, a couple different things to answer there. I think I took a lot of the business side stuff on, and because let's be honest, people look at you and perceive you to be more serious, rightfully or not, when you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I had some experience with business, but not necessarily like business law directly. But it was just easier to get meetings with banks or have those conversations when you have that title.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or in our case, we also had to literally change the law in Hudson to let a brewery in. So that was much easier to open those doors and have those conversations.
Yeah, I think to that point, there's a bunch of stuff that I thought I was going to be doing, but now he kind of does, and there's stuff that he was kind of doing that now I kind of do. It's some of the things have changed and all that, but initially I thought I'd have more ties to like the tap room piece, but just I don't know, Justin kind of does more of that. I guess more or less so now, but
Yeah.
So you were the creator. He was like the paperwork. Let's make sure this gets done. So what? At least that was the initial idea, is what I'm gathering.
Yeah.
more or less.
So what was it about? Like, why did you think that this was gonna be a thing? Was it just like, hey, Hudson needs a brewery, so like let's do one, or was there something specific about like you wanted to do something differently that wasn't available? What was it about that like, hey, we want to actually do this thing? Why?
A bit of both. So one part is, and I wouldn't even say the first part. The second part of why I guess I should start with the first part, was I think anyone who opens a brewery or a lot of different things thinks they have a different angle on that's better, or there's a market for it. Otherwise, we'd all be drinking Sierra Nevada,
Mhm.
which is still awesome.
Still
but
really
I mean,
good beer.
everyone thinks or has a different take on it, or has a different expression. Just like music. I mean, not everyone listens to. Why can't I think of a good? Not everyone listens to Garth Brooks and country music. They do it better, or to make another change. I was going to say Patsy Cline. I don't know why I'm in the country mode right now. I'm sorry. I apologize. But in our case, I think we had a very different approach to beer than a lot of the things going on and that were percolating and have really come to fruition in the Twin Cities. We take a kind of a very classic approach to our beers, and we make them our own and put riffs on them that are modern. But we're not making like sugary alcohol water that people can call beer in it because it's fermented. We're making classic style beers with some modern ingredients or techniques, and that's kind of how we rein it in.
Yeah, I mean, and I've had I kind of got into it, but I've brewed a bunch of different companies' beers, and so I was very confident that with all that experience that I could certainly get us to where we needed to be making great liquid.
And then the second part of that is Hudson had a successful brewery that ended up getting bought out and
That's
moved.
the one that got sold that I worked for.
Okay.
It's clearly a size town that can sustain that. And it just felt like this area had a gap for something like that.
Yeah.
Rush River was south of here. Oliphant was going north of here. Bobtown was kind of doing their little...
Pitchfork is more of a brew.
Pitchfork was
Pitchfork
here.
is a brew pub concept. Like all the other breweries around except for Oliphant are like brew pubs, and we specifically wanted to be a distribution brewery. So like most of our beer is sold, not here in the tap room. We don't have to necessarily rely on the tap room. Well, we do.
Yeah.
You do.
Not that big.
Yeah, not that big. But
60% of our beer actually is sold out the loading dock doors right now.
Sure.
And that's a 20% growth from the year before that, and we're trying to keep that going till that's the vast majority.
So
of the
that
business.
was one of the things that we wanted to do differently about from the other breweries around here, was that I didn't want to mess with the restaurant part of it. It just seems so complicated. I mean,
Right.
maybe down the road we will probably get into that at some point, but
So it's a dance of being part of the community and ingrained in the community you're in. But so much of our business is from, a 100-mile radius around us. So it's being a part of a bunch of communities.
Sure. Well, it's when you see like you kind of have to hit all these different avenues, right? Like with me, we had a skateboard shop in Eau Claire when I was growing up. It was called Underloud. It existed. That closed in maybe 2009 or something. But Eau Claire has over 60,000 people. That closed, and then there just wasn't a skateboard shop. So like everyone knew like this has a population, if you compare it to other towns, that this could support one if it's done right.
right.
If there was another skateboard shop right there, I just like couldn't do it. It's just about like I saw the opportunity. It's like, okay, cool, I want to do this. Do I want to do something totally different? Not really. Like with the skateboard shop, I wanted to provide this cool little community hub for the skateboarders because that's what I was fond of. And when I go to skate shops, yes, they're all unique and I want to do my own thing with it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I love what a skateboard shop is. And that's what I wanted to be a part of. And then I have all this creative expression from it, which kind of sounds like what you guys are doing of like, hey, I want like owning a brewery sounds dope. There's a need for this. And then this allows, because you've already been brewing, allows total creative freedom to be able to be like, look, if I want to make something that I think is going to be successful, I don't have to get approved. We can just do this thing, and then growing outside of like the 100-mile range, like that's just the natural progression of something, right?
Yeah.
If the people in the area are liking it and you say whatever percentage of people are buying your beer every time they go to the liquor store, tight, they're liking it. Their friends who are in this area all of a sudden are going to be asking, just like how people in Minnesota are like, oh, where do I get Spotted Cow? The same general thing is going to happen, and then it's going to grow and grow and grow, or at least hopefully, right? How cool would it be if you make a beer and you're like, oh, I really think this is good, and now all of a sudden everybody out in California is just in love with it? You'd feel probably pretty dope, right?
Yeah, none of that stuff ever gets old for us. If seeing like I drive up the hill past this liquor store called Lucky's, and just the entire window just says Hop Barrel all over it, and it just like gives me goosebumps every time. That stuff it's the coolest thing for people to hit you up, and like, oh, where can I get your beer? Or you sent me an email today. Some person in California is like, yeah, I need like 2 cases. Can you send and it's not lost on us. It never gets old. It's always exciting.
We go to Duluth about once a month to kind of support the places that sell our beer up there. And it's still, you just kind of get this little tingly, excited feeling when you're sitting there, you see the beer on tap, and then not knowing who you are, someone at the bar orders it. Or
that's the really cool thing, I think.
Actually,
people are talking about it.
Great experience. We were at the 7 West in Superior 3 weeks ago, and sitting there talking to a friend Molly who runs the place. And as I'm sitting there up in a booth, this couple kills one of our kegs, and it had no idea they were even drinking our beer, and they're all excited because they ring a gong and do something to eat. So I sneak out to my truck, grab a sweatshirt, bring it over. They had no idea it was there, just the look on their face. It was so cool to make that connection with someone who enjoyed what we do, and it was awesome. So it's those little experiences that I find really drive me more now than actually even making the beer. I mean, I love coming up with new ideas and trying new beers, but those are the little moments that really drive me.
It's kind of the like recognition you didn't expect, right? Like you expect your friends and family to support what you're doing when you really care about it, and they're the first ones, right, that are buying a beer or buying a t-shirt and like wearing it. Yeah. But then when because I feel the same way too, when I all of a sudden get an order or somebody tags me on Instagram wearing something and I don't know who they are personally and I can't recall it, I'm like, you like my stuff that much? That is so sick that you like what I've created. So I know exactly what you're talking about. So
that was kind of a weird thing for me, though, is people knowing who I am. Like that drove me totally nuts for a couple of years. It took me to kind of make peace with that whole thing. Like I'm kind of used to be more of a private human being, and now I'm just like, screw it. Everybody knows.
Dude, everyone's going to recognize your beard. So just in case anybody not listening doesn't know, you got a big, just luxurious red beard. People are going to know that you're the dude. All right. So what was the first official Hop and Barrel beer? Can you describe it? Is it still available? Does it do well? Did it do well?
I want to hear which one you're going to say.
Got it. It was Minnetonka, right?
Was it?
Zorro?
I don't know. See, I think it was Crooked Grin, wasn't it?
You think that was first?
I don't know.
Well, either way,
I think
it's
it was
still available.
Wisconsin because
we got the lager in tank.
That's what it was. Yeah,
Oh, Jesus. We could look at the batch sheet and tell you.
we'd
but
have to look at the batch
it's
sheet. But
one
I
of those-
I think it's Minnetonka.
So let's assume it's Minnetonka. What's the story behind
Yeah.
that beer?
That one's got kind of a cool story. We were at the Minnesota Homebrew Convention the year before we opened, the National Homebrew Convention that was in Minnesota at Minneapolis this year, and you were repping Inbound.
Yep.
And I actually hit a sour beer in the contest. So we were hanging out, taking in the convention, and Brees out of Chilton, Wisconsin, had this brand new malt they were unveiling, this Synergy malt, and
It's a Pilsner malt. There are other malting houses that make Synergy malt.
Yeah, Synergy is a type of barley, and then they had
Two-row.
a special way of malting it. And they had they had a house one, and then 3 different breweries made a Pilsner lager with this malt. I think one was a blonde ale, technically. But we fell in love with it. It was like, of this entire convention, the thing we kept going back and drinking. There's literally thousands of beers there and unique whales and all sorts of crazy stuff. But it was this simple malt we loved, and we're like, we're going to make a beer with this.
This beer is unintentionally is what's called a smash beer. So a single malt, single hop. So it's Sapphire hops from Germany. It's Breeze Synergy malt, and then the original Weihenstephaner yeast strain, and that's it. And then we mess with the water profile. Obviously, if you're a brewery and you're not messing with your water profile, you're doing something wrong. So
that was definitely the first beer we'd written up. I think the first one
think.
we brewed, but it's still available. I'd say now it's our second biggest beer. For years, it was our biggest brand. In the last year, Crooked Grin, our West Coast IPA, has become our biggest.
see, and then you forget about Shandy, how big of a beer that is, though.
No,
That's what
Shandy's
I've been
big.
told. Yeah,
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
told me specifically when I come here I need to get that.
See,
I'm just saying.
but the Shandy
from
is
volume.
half Minnetonka and half like lemon sour soda from Spring Grove, Minnesota.
Yeah, popularity, our Shandy is the biggest, most known
It's
beer.
huge.
Yeah,
Cool. So which one is right now, like normally, if you had to pick which one is your favorite, you had to drink this one forever. Which one's your favorite of Hop and Barrel Ichi?
Crooked.
Crooked.
All right, cool. So I gotta have that one too.
I would island beer that, yeah.
Okay, so not everyone's going to see the imagery. Some people are just like listening while they're driving to work or whatever. So I have the show come out on Mondays, and the entire like point of the show is to showcase and inspire people and look at and say, hey, doesn't really matter what you're passionate about. You probably could do that for a living. There's probably a way, so that way you don't have to go to this office job that you're driving to right now. Maybe you're listening to Justin and Brian and you're like, for whatever reason, I identify with these guys. I have this awesome beard, or I'm a lawyer and I hate it, or whatever. And now you're going to be inspired to do this type of thing. So that being said, they're not necessarily seeing the visuals. Hopefully they'll see it on the gram and all that. My shop looks like a house, which is not ideal, but it looks like a house. You come into my store, that's when it looks cool. I have it painted and designed to look like a city overgrown by trees that grow skateboards. I hand painted all these bricks everywhere. The pillars are all like just natural wood, like brown. And then I have all this fake foliage hanging from the ceiling with skateboards and stuff. And it's like a very unique thing that if you've been there, you know that you've been there, which is, like I said, in my opinion, extremely important that it's like memorable. To describe your brewery, if you had to kind of like take people on a little journey, they're not closing their eyes because they're driving, but they're painting in their picture, like in their minds, they're trying to think of this, try to paint the picture of what your brewery looks like to them.
So you walk through a double entry foyer and into something that is definitely reminiscent of an old car shop from the 1940s. Large bay windows kind of overlooking a busy second street that gets sometimes 15,000 cars going by a day. But you're confronted right away with kind of this overwhelming green logo and gray-backed bar. Usually it's a little more busy than it is right now. There's usually a handful of people sitting at the bar and a little bustle in this room. And the noise is, I'd say, comfortable, but there's kind of a nice crowd murmur in this room most of the time. So the audio is something we're definitely very aware of, because there's, as you're listening to this, a lot of background noise at a brewery anyway.
Yeah, this compressor going off.
But we have 3 very kind of distinct areas. That's the first kind of welcoming bustle, especially coming in a Friday night. You got, pre-COVID at least, this really comfortable kind of warm vibe from the crowd going out. So you kind of get welcome into this nice mass of people, and then you go off in your separate ways. And you either come up here where we're sitting now in this front tap room surrounded by windows and overlooking downtown Hudson and on some days the river, or you go out back to what we kind of have started calling the beer garden that we're developing. We've got fire pits, a couple tables, a lot more plants come summertime. But it's just this awesome patio scene that from now until September will be packed with people.
It's a great patio, which we are starting to refer to, like he said, as the the beer garden. Marketing, man, marketing.
But then the back room we affectionately call the barrel room. It's
Yeah.
where we do a lot of the barrel aging. It's a little low because it's been packaged right now, but we've got an arcade in the corner. These quasi beer hall picnic tables.
Yeah, no, we like legit had a conversation about this when we were kind of building the brewery, and the barrel room is more like you can see there's a bunch of video games in there and like skee ball, and where there used to be a stack of board games and that you can't really do that. Hopefully soon we can start doing that again. But there's we have darts and one of those bowling games and all that. And that to me, I wanted that room to be the room with TVs, with games, with a bunch of racket and noise. Because when we were kind of thinking about this concept, I'm like, which bars do I like and why? And one thing you have is one type of bar is without TVs, just a comfortable area that's almost more of a coffee shop vibe kind of. And then the barrel room is more like, the raw, like more industrial, like games and like commotion.
Very versatile. Everything moves around a lot.
And we always like to say that Hop and Barrel is a community center that sells beer too. So we're open to, we've had all kinds of crazy events here.
Oh God. Goat yoga.
Goat yoga.
We've got a couple self-defense classes and yoga starting up next month. We've had a sailing club bring a small wind-powered yacht.
There's some guys that bring swords down and sword fight in there on Monday
nights.
Oh,
Monday nights, yeah.
LARPers?
Yeah.
Well,
no, they're like serious, like they do fencing and like they're serious about it. They have helmets.
Teachers who have, I'm trying to get the right word, but grant money to study medieval sword fighting, and they bring in
Irish cane fighting. Like it's...
See, that's one of the like coolest parts about like local businesses, the people that do it right, is it's just about the community.
Yep.
That's why people are so loyal, right? And that's the fun part is like you don't have to get it approved to have people fence in your place. Like you can do whatever you want. But then when people like that, right? When your customers get to do shit like that, that's when they all of a sudden develop this like sense of ownership with the business, and that's when they like bleed Hop and Barrel. That's like when they really, really like get into it. And I love that you have both sections, because I totally know what you mean. Depending on who I'm hanging out with or what my vibe is that day, I don't want to sit somewhere where everyone's going to hear my voice. My voice carries.
Yeah.
Depending on what I'm talking about, I want everybody hearing me. I'm not sitting out in the beer garden. Like I'm trying to throw darts where like no one's paying attention to me. So it just depends. Do you allow everyone to walk through like the majority of the whole brewery? Do you do tours through the whole thing? Obviously there's some spots that are off limits, but
it's actually pretty well barricaded and there's signs, so it's pretty obvious where you can and can't go.
Sure.
But we do tours every Saturday. Nathan, one of our brewers, used to be the kind of a taproom lead, does an amazing tour every Saturday at 2.
Yeah, we'll take a little tour after we're off mic, but very definitely love showing people the building. I'm very proud of the way we jammed everything in back there.
Well,
so
and kind of like the front, all the doors we have here are glass transparent, and we built in kind of a bay window of viewing, so you don't have a very good view of the brew house, but you can see a lot of the back brewery floor from almost every angle and see the production and packaging side of what's going on.
I love that you can see all this stuff. Like I love at breweries when you can see that. I always say like gut shot, you know what I mean? Like you open up something like the electronic and you take a picture of it. Like I love seeing the insides of stuff. I
think it's like kind of a funny contrast where like we're in something that like, especially since you said it, like I could see this being a showroom for sure. So my brain almost wants to convince myself that it's going to be like all fumey, like gasoline and shit. Like that's what I think of. However, with the coloring and all the natural woods, and then you guys have a million houseplants, which like I appreciate so much because I love houseplants. The air is actually like, I wouldn't expect it to be so like fresh. It's like such a cool contrast in that way.
You got to come in on a brew day sometime
because
it smells amazing.
Oh, don't worry. I'm planning on coming back. Already all my friends are like, so when are we going to go and like hang out at Hop and Barrel? I was like, well, don't ask for free drinks, but yeah, let's take a bus, dude. Let's take all these people from Eau Claire and just like party out. We got to show like represent out here. That's whatever.
We'll buy the first round.
Boom. All right. You heard it here first, friends.
Get on the bus. What we're gonna
do. Yeah.
How big is the bus?
How big is the bus?
Says the bit.
And they only stay for one drink and then we dip out. No. Okay. So sales pitch. Everyone needs to give a sales pitch, right? So why, just if in your quick, like 1 to 2 minute, why do people want to buy Hop and Barrel when they go to the grocery store, the liquor store, and they see like Summit and they see this and that, whatever? It's not about direct comparisons, but why do they want to buy Hop and Barrel?
Because it's something unique and drinkable. We it's a crappy sales pitch, but we have something called the rule of two internally, where we won't make a beer unless someone would sit at a bar and order and enjoy 2 pints of it. And there's a lot of great beer out there, but you won't have more than one, or you'll try something else. So we always want to do something that's just catchy enough, but just drinkable enough, you'll have 2. So with us, we like to think our customers buying our beer wherever know they're going to get something they can count on and enjoy. May not be their style all the time, but they're going to be happy with the choice.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't please everybody. That's not how it works. If there was a perfect beer, everyone would drink that beer. It doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? I say the same thing with skateboards and stuff in my shop too. They're like, well, which is the best one? I'm like, if there was a best one, that'd be the only one I'd have. Like, it doesn't work that way. Like, people have different preferences.
I guess another way to put it is consistency.
Yeah.
We try new things, obviously, but if you get a Crooked Grin, it's a Crooked Grin. It tastes like a Crooked Grin. That's kind of the goal. It's not making whatever new thing and always having something new for us. It's doing new stuff and trying it, but making a product people like and go back to and enjoy that experience or enjoy that memory. So much of beer drinking is about experience and memory. You had this beer and had a great conversation, or you had this beer at a time of your life and it stuck with you. I mean, we all have that when you really think about it, whether it's a liquor, a wine, or a beer. So trying to recreate that in a small scale is what we like. And if you have something that's different every time, you don't have that memory to latch onto.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, you associate things, and there's a certain level of comfort that you want to be able to develop. This is kind of a question I didn't like think of ahead of time. Well, I've asked this on previous episodes. So I think it's really important to throw events. Right now, obviously, COVID, like, we can't throw events, and I'm sure, and we could talk about COVID because I'm sure that's like been a very big challenge it is for everybody, but specifically this industry, I'm sure it was really difficult. But there are places in Eau Claire that they throw like one big event a year, and they're just like known for that event, right? That's just like what they do. Like Eau Claire, there's the I hate the bar, so I'll just call it out. Pickle, like, that bar sucks. But they do Pickle Fest. And it's just like the dirty college bar that's like everyone's dancing, but it's just like dirty. Like, I never go there. But they do this thing called Pickle Fest, and it's just like a ton of people go there every year. Everyone looks forward to their shirts and like all that type of stuff. I don't know what else actually happens for the event, but they have their own thing. Versus like when I went down to Milwaukee and I interviewed Henry, who owns Mobcraft, they do like, I think he called it Weird Fest, where like they had all these people like do whatever, like all these like crazy different things. If you guys were going to pick like one event, we'll say, it doesn't matter what the day is. If you're going to have one event every year that's just going to be like Hop and Barrel's thing, what would you guys want to do?
The Sundown Taco Throwdown.
Yeah, the Taco Throwdown.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like something you've done before.
Oh yeah.
Can you describe it?
Yeah, we couldn't do it last year, but we get hit up pretty frequently for charity stuff, and I always say I would like to give every charity $5, but then I will run out of my $5 bills, right? So we do one big charity thing every year. And the first year it was fire department in town, which is, a lot of our like friends, have ties to it and work there. And one of our biggest fans is like one of the chiefs there, which is always funny. He's always texting me like, hey, when are you going to do more bourbon barrel stuff? So we did that. Then we did mental health is a very important thing for me too. And so our big donation was to mental health locally last year, or I'm sorry, the year before last. And then this year is
Operation Help.
Yeah.
It's a local charity that just got started up. They're basically kind of a stopgap of what Lutheran social services used to be, but they get people who kind of had jobs, either a housing or a work placement or filling in those gaps for social services, but they are focused just here in Hudson and St. Croix Valley.
Yeah.
But they're based out of Hudson. They're a new kind of startup charity.
So we grab, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 restaurants from around town.
Well, yeah, and take a step
Sure.
back. If you're not familiar with Hudson, it's a very foodie town. People might not realize it, but we've got 24 restaurants within 4 blocks of us here, and tacos,
all very different too.
Very different. And none of them really do the same thing or have a different take. So we've got a lot of ties. We obviously sell beer at a lot of these places, so we're connected with it, and we just like hanging out at a lot of these bars and restaurants. So it was an idea to kind of do something very community focused, where we get the restaurants in to all do we've tweaked it a little bit, but basically they all make a taco and we throw a bunch of beer in. You buy a ticket, all the ticket money goes to the charity, And then it gives a bunch of these restaurant chefs and restaurateurs a chance to actually hang out when, they do it at each other's bars, but there's not like a big event like this.
And you do it here.
We do it here. Yep.
Yeah.
Our parking lot can be closed. We can pour beer out there. So we fill the whole place up. People come in, buy tickets, and it turns into quite
It's pretty crazy
industry party too.
You'll find you can buy a pre-sale ticket for 30 or it's 40 at the door, and we rarely sell like hardly any pre-sale tickets. Like it's always like, no, I'll pay the $10 more at the door kind of a thing. Like, it's pre-sale. No, they don't. And they do like doing charity, which is great. But the kind of the cool part about the taco throwdown is there are, and I'm doing air quotes, secret ingredients. So we pretend like the ingredients are secret to the chefs, but they're really not. So one year it was flaming hot Cheetos you had to add into the taco somehow. What else was there?
We did hops. We a bunch of crazy.
Kumquat, because that's a funny word. And the chefs were like, oh, we can work with that, and
so this year we don't want to make any, depending when this airs, it'll either be done or out, but we picked a common protein this year. So everyone's doing a protein. We can
just say it. It's pork belly. Everybody loves pork belly.
Fine. Yeah. And then Pringles chips.
Pringles makes like a million different flavors of Pringles. And so I thought that would be really neat to...
It gives them some options to go with. Yeah, they're going to use the pizza ones, and it's going to be great somehow.
And then the other ingredient is anything locally sourced within 60 miles of here.
And then you can kind of put that on display when you're at the little station where they're going to serve the taco.
Yeah, I think this year
boost that a little bit
after COVID, we used to go a little beyond, have some restaurants from outside of Hudson or north of town come in. And we're really refocusing on just downtown Hudson this year, just to kind of bring it back local.
COVID was such a hit for everybody.
Yeah,
obviously it's been tough in this size community. It's
Sure. Well, thankfully, like you were saying, 60% of your beer, right, isn't through the tap room. So obviously, like even if you like a 40% hit is a massive hit. So don't get me wrong, but at least there was an outlet, right? Versus some businesses just didn't exist. I've talked to some entertainers where it's just like you just can't work. There's nothing to do. You know what I mean? So talking about that, one thing I want to quick address is when you throw events like that, the beauty of it is it doesn't have to be the same year to year, because whenever any random thing pops up, you could do it, right? Like if all of a sudden somebody was like, hey, I could totally put like a wrestling ring in here temporarily.
Oh my God.
Like you could totally do it. You know what I mean?
Actually,
August
that's happening.
It's happening.
Too. No, that was just our favorite, because that's actually the one we run. But when we said community center with beer, part of that is we just like hosting things. So any wild pitch people come up with,
we're usually into it.
We'll probably say yes, as long as we don't have to run it, because we'll host it.
We'll just show up and drink beer and chuckle and high five. Like
I say the same thing in my store. Like art show, music. Like if you want to do something, we had a listening party for a rapper friend of mine in my store, and I'm like, yeah, dude, invite people. Like I'll just put away the stuff that I don't want things to get spilt on. That's whatever. Basically, like no problem. So opening day for me, because we kind of like filled in the gaps up till that point. But opening day for me, I had like no money. I wasn't a lawyer, and nobody believes that a skateboard shop's going to work, right? Like so nobody would give me money. They just wouldn't. So I went and I tried to like put my business plan. And I was young. I opened my store when I was like 23. So, but I had my business plan and went to the Small Business Development Center. I had numbers, went to a bank, had a meeting, and they're like, no. I'm like, oh, well, what do I need to change? And they're like, skateboard shops don't make money, statistically speaking. So no, good luck. Well, I'm just a very stubborn person, And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. I don't really need you to say yes. I'm just going to, but I got to figure out how. Stupid, but how I was able to do it was I opened up 2 credit cards for as much as I possibly could and maxed them out. Granted, I also got my space in January. I was making really good money working for Verizon, and then worked a 12-hour day on my day off at Hellsberg Diamonds because I still worked there well. And then on the side was getting my shop ready until I opened in April. So I was working my butt off. It wasn't just the credit cards. That wasn't it. But that was the extent of my spending power. Therefore, when people came in, my store was like empty. It was garbage. The only reason people wanted to come in was because I grew up skateboarding there. So I already knew all the skateboarders. So like I was skating the park with them. They knew they were excited about the shop coming. And I was like, dude, I'll like make hot dogs for everybody. So I had like a stupid grill in my parking lot. And it was just like the community coming together. But I sold like half my merchandise that day.
Nice.
Because I didn't have very much. So looking at it, I'm like, dude, that was not a good representation of like what my shop actually looks like today. But that's where I kind of had to start. Now there's really cool memories from it. you know, but it was embarrassing to me because I'm like, this is not what my shop was meant to look like at all. I just did what I could do. For you guys, what was your opening day like? Was there certain memories or things that stuck out? Was there like crazy problems? What was it
Yes.
like?
Well,
All of it,
yeah. So there were equipment delays 3 months.
Yeah, we were supposed to be. We figured we'd be opening around Halloween,
Mm-hmm.
so we were hoping to get the equipment in August when we took over the building. And instead, what happened was, as we took over the building, we found out the same week. They're like, "Oh, well, your equipment's probably going to be coming around Halloween." So we sat here, had this place cleaned and everything built out. And
Well, and we had hired a brewer
we
too.
hired a brewer at the time, so it was us
and there
two.
was nothing for any of the three of us to do.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time at the Windsor Stube in town drinking big German beers.
Yeah, it was just we kind of looked at the brewer and we were like, "Well, do you have a video game you like to play?" Because
we promised
we
him
bought
a
a-
job, so
we
we
bought a
found things to kind of
Nintendo.
keep busy with, and it. Looking back on it, though, it was a little bit of a waste of money, but it let us get much more comfortable with the site, the community, each other. Kind of have this time to just focus on what it's going to be like and plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then the equipment came in, and that November, I don't remember much of it, but we brewed and built this brew house. Basically, I mean, the tanks were in the large fermenting tanks, but the actual brew house, the piping,
that's what was
auger,
delayed.
which we built all of that in the span of about 11 days and brewed enough beer by mid-December to fill up 16 tap lines.
Mm-hmm.
That was
crazy.
It was insane.
And then we were sitting around on, what was it, Thursday, December 8th.
Yep.
And we were kind of like, just looked around and we're like, should we just open? Let's just open. And
So
kick down the open signs and
Yep.
Oh, you didn't have like a big event.
We
You just were like,
we had a
did.
grand opening for the 16th of December, I think.
yeah.
We now celebrate our anniversary in January just because this town's a Christmas town. There's stuff
totally.
going on, so we just throw our party in January. But it was, I think, December 16th we had a grand opening.
Yeah.
But the week before that, we're just like, we got 8 beers. Let's just turn the lights on and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a Friday, and then by that Saturday, it was just...
I think I remember you looking at me and being like, dude, we have to open.
Yeah, no, there was, like you said, there was no money by that
Yeah.
point. Any reserves we had gotten used, and there's obviously always budget over. So it was
Mhm.
like, we've got to.
We have to open. And then we did.
I think that was actually really good though. I mean, you think about like the stress a business relationship puts on you, especially when you work for yourself, where you can't just like call HR or whatever. Like you just have to figure it out, right? You have to. But when you're put in positions like that, especially right when you open, that stuff happens. The fact you guys had time to just like get to know each other a little bit more personally, I think that probably was really helpful. Like throughout that, you know what I mean? Throughout those more challenging times, because all of a sudden it's like, okay, no, I actually know Brian. He is actually a good guy, despite the fact that today he blew it in my mind. Like he's still actually invested. You know what I mean? Versus like if you don't have a whole lot of those conversations, and all of a sudden somebody's not holding up their end of the business relationship or whatever in your mind that day, like they're not doing their job, then you start to question like, well, what was I doing, making the right choice working with this person? But when you have that relationship built in the first place a little bit stronger, I think that probably was, you know, ultimately kind of helpful.
Mm-hmm.
For the opening day thing, like the Saturday, so it just got busy right away. But did you throw for the grand opening like a big event of some kind? What did that look like, or did you not really do that?
Not really. We didn't have music. I mean, we had, you know, a formal announcement we were opening through online and different community channel. Like we had something in the newspaper.
Yeah, did we just not do?
You just opened.
I think we just
just
opened.
kind of opened. We didn't really we weren't doing much with music at the time, and we still aren't really a big music thing, so we
No.
didn't have a lot going on with that.
Sure.
It's a little bit of an uphill battle sometimes.
But no, it wasn't much of a party.
Sure.
It was, you know, kind of just a new brewery in town.
I mean, we do it up now, but
But at that point, we got to, you know, looking back at the time, this place was central in town. It was the one thing not open downtown. We'd had banners up about a brewery coming soon. People had seen giant equipment coming and going, and it's a very visible spot in the community.
Mhm.
So, not that we were like super popular at the time, but there was definitely this local draw of when's this place going to open. There was a lot of talk about it, and everyone had different ideas. So, really, just turning the lights on and getting cars in here kind
Sure.
of fueled the first couple weeks of things going on its own.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. My location, you guys haven't seen it, but it's not somewhere you would normally drive. And people say all the time, like, why aren't you in a better location? I'm like, well, for something like what I do, I don't have passerby go, oh, that looks cool, I'm gonna go get a beer. Like, people are either looking to buy a skateboard that day or they're not, and they
Right.
Google it and they come to me. So I save a lot of money that way. But by being in such a central location, so visible with these windows and everything, even before open, I'm sure people are like, well,
Yeah.
I need to go see what that is. We're still in a relatively small town, so it's like people talk and they're excited when something new is coming. Talking about like the growing pains, I think you open and you have, like you said, you thought he maybe was going to do some things, and then all of a sudden that changed. Now all of a sudden you're hiring somebody, whatever. From the first year through the first 2 years or whatever, that first time frame, what were some of the big growing pains that happened? Were there any like major changes that had to happen? Like, did you have a vision for something and you're like, well, this just doesn't work, we have to change this?
I think how beer is distributed and selling beer has been the single biggest change of everything.
That's always changing.
I mean, there's
Like-
you obviously have changes with personnel. We've had a couple different brewers through, but the how beers ship for us and how we thought we distribute beer has changed dramatically, even in the first year. And when we opened, we were self-distribution, so we would load a couple kegs and cases in the back of the truck,
I just forget how much work that was.
and yeah, you make a little more margin. You're not selling to a middle company, but you'd have to have a salesperson. At the time, we had a sales guy, and then for a while we had 4 sales reps.
Yeah.
So we have a lot more people involved running around this part of Wisconsin. And we didn't cross over to Minnesota at this time. It was all just Wisconsin.
Yeah, and so a thing that I don't have to, well, I do a little bit, but what I used to have to do was create all these invoices, make sure the inventory was on, get the orders pulled, get the driver in the truck loaded up, process all these invoices, and then chase people down for money all the time, because I'm so glad I don't have to do that anymore. But yeah, it was like calling people up. You get net 30?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's, chasing
Or is
bills.
it
But
net
then there's
15?
things people don't think about. Like, I know for a fact, Minnesotan starts freezing at 17 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So when you're driving beer up to Superior and you're getting a hotel room to ship the beer into your room so it doesn't freeze and get destroyed before you can get it to all the accounts you have to, there's some real fun experiences.
Sure.
But yeah, that was the biggest shift. And part of so many breweries opening up, you're almost taught, or it's ingrained in craft beer culture, that distributors are kind of the enemy, or they do something that's going to take away your profits. And kind of getting past that and opening our eyes and starting to talk to distributors.
I was totally anti-distributor for a super long time,
Yeah.
but then when you're kicking out 400 orders,
Well, you're going to stunt your growth. Like,
It's-
ultimately, you can't do all of it 100% yourself,
you
right?
can't. So kind of embracing and finding ways to work with our distribution partners has been eye-opening, a godsend, a game changer for how we operate.
Mhm.
Some of our, our best ties in the industry as a whole are with some of our
Yeah.
sales reps and craft beer managers.
Yep. But yeah, it's self-distribution is
A slug.
it's rough. We hand built our local market. We hand built, Eau Claire. We hand built Superior. Literally, you drive up with samples and you have to walk in and ask for the sale. You know what I mean? And now we really don't have to do that.
But not only that, then within as short amount of time as possible, you got to get
You
that
got to get
beer
the
to
beer up
them,
there.
Right.
and then that keg or follow up on it, and then keep it going. So
Well, yeah, it's like developing relationships.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, you have to constantly be nursing those relationships. Otherwise, people are going to forget about you. You can't assume just because people have bought it before that they're always going to want to support you. There's a good chance that the first time they bought it from you was a bit of a, chance they're taking on this person that they enjoyed
Oh, 100%.
talking to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In which case, if all of a sudden you disappear, they no longer care about you personally. Now you're like, that relationship diminishes, and some new dude comes in and wants to sell beer. So it's like, you got to constantly doing that stuff. We just talked about like the growing pains, but what are the biggest challenges currently that you're trying to figure out and work through? COVID's obviously, like, we're all wondering when things are going to be back open to do events and stuff like that. But in general, what are like the big challenges at this point?
I think it's kind of dealing with the remnants of that. Hudson's been a little unique in the challenges we've had to deal with COVID. A year ago, we obviously were shut down like everyone and had to pivot to a takeout beer through the tap room only. And we luckily still had distribution, but half of all of our distribution is still kegs. So those aren't going anywhere. So that was dramatically impacted too. And then Hudson was a little unique in how close it was to the Twin Cities when Wisconsin was sort of forced reopened right before summer. this town was inundated.
That was crazy.
It was great to have people in, but it was still a time when a lot of the staff and people were very nervous, even though the state said, you can do whatever. So finding this fine line of having protocols and being safe, but having the potential to literally have a nonstop line of customers in the door, it was tough to deal with. It was awkward at times. I think I'm pretty proud of the way we approached it. I think we actually took a week to kind of get everyone comfortable, figure out what we're going to do, spacing, pulled out. I mean, right now, this is a much different place than it was even when we reopened. We had half the seating or no seating taped on the floor where people could stand. And it was very different. And that was a lot of headaches. People had a lot of different attitudes on that first reopening.
Well, we had to have someone stand at the door so there weren't too many people in here, and it was just people don't like being told no.
Well, you can't please everybody, specifically in that. Like, there are people who are so really, unfortunately, it pushed people to the extremes politically, and we don't need to get in politics, but it pushed people to extremes where it's like you can't find a middle ground. You just have to do what in your heart you think is the right thing. And hopefully your customers overall understand. But I still I've had people, I don't even need to get into it, but I try. And thankfully, I've never had anyone get really mad at me in my store, because I just tell them, look, this is what I'm required to do for the sake of not making anyone really mad. Even if you don't agree, can you just humor me because I have to?
But I think part of the challenge with Hudson was we lived or died by a lot more what was happening in Minnesota than Wisconsin. So as Minnesota would close down, everyone from the Twin Cities would come here.
Sure, because there's no
the nights here got pretty crazy in town.
They were bad. The crime was, it just went through the roof. DUIs, bar fights. There was a stabbing, death.
Murder.
There was a murder.
Which I know for some cities that's that happens every night. But for Hudson, there hadn't been a murder in 6-7 years, and that was a crime of passion kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
So there were those things, but I think beyond the COVID growing pains, beyond the COVID stuff, our growing pains are, and you'll see later how little space we have. That's kind of our problem right now, is trying to kick out enough beer out of such a small brewery. And so we're kind of moving to do some contract brewing, possibly building a building in the parking lot out there, or maybe finding a different production facility. So we're really kind of almost in expansion mode again.
Trying to manage the growth, right? Trying to manage it effectively, so that way it doesn't take over.
Right. Yeah, and it'd be different if we were a 100% distribution brewery in a warehouse. It's all right, we'll add a shed on and more tanks. That's what you have to do. But we've got this fine line where so much of what we do is still this community and this building you're looking around at. So we can't do anything that really cuts into this too much or alienates the people who come into the tap room to enjoy the beer too. Not that I ever hope we get to that point, but ultimately I think someday production could be somewhere else, and this is just a nice spot to come have our beer. But trying to figure out that dance to get there isn't something you can't just flip a switch and all of a sudden have the money to do that.
Well, here's the problem, right? Is a lot of times people expand too fast because they see a demand, and then the quality diminishes so significantly because they're biting off more than they can chew, and then their reputation gets smoked, and now people don't want to pay for things the same amount, and it just kind of throws you off. We had this thing happen in Eau Claire where this dude owned a chain of grocery stores. It was called Gordy's, and they bought 3 of the other grocery stores just in town, let alone a bunch of other ones. And he bought all this stuff, and then they didn't have enough money to stock the shelves. So nobody wanted it. And within a year, all of them, I think, closed. Maybe there's one left of all the locations, but the dude, they were doing really well, but they bit off more than they could chew, put themselves in a vulnerable position. And then okay, well, where was all that hard work? You grew and you grew and you grew. Sometimes it's better to just take time. I always tell people, in my opinion, the people who are most successful at business recognize the right opportunities and when to pounce on them. Just because there's a demand doesn't mean that right this second's the time to build a building in the parking lot. It's about looking at the logistics and the opportunities of okay, well, where's the best time? How can we do this most effectively? Sometimes it's holding yourself back slightly and saying, okay, well, let's build up what beers and stuff we want to do or whatever to put out next year when we realistically can do this type of thing, and just spend more time planning or whatever. And that's different for each business, right? But it's really hard to do that because it's exciting to want to grow. Mm-hmm. It's just okay, well, is it right now the time to do this, that, or whatever? I don't think that many people know about how a beer is really so I guess I want to know the story of this. how can you tell a story of how a beer like goes through its whole life, from when somebody comes up with the idea to get then it gets brewed, how it gets distributed in general? When you come up with an idea for a beer, what's the life of that beer until it gets into my house and I drink it?
Sure. So Space Force is a beer that we have, and I think that it came from just the name Space Force. I heard the name of that and was like, Justin, hey, you need to trademark this. And then we made a recipe for it. So that's one of them, and others they were old homebrew recipes. So this one in particular, I wanted a really tasty double IPA with some of the cool kid hops. And so I got the name Space Force. Then we made the double IPA, and then I hit up a friend from a childhood friend who's an illustrator out in the Bay Area, and had him make. I love doing the label creation, and so I like to say to the graphic designer or the illustrator, I said, I want a skeleton in a spacesuit drinking a beer, and then the beer is zero gravity, so it's kind of floating. And so he made that, and then we all like Star Wars, so he put like the Darth Vader chest plate Easter egg on the can. So that's how that one went. But as far as making the beer from grain to glass, it takes about 3.5-4 weeks from brewing to packaging, and then probably another what the heck was that? Probably another 2 weeks to get it onto the shelf and into your house. So I'd say maybe, if that's the direction you're going with it.
So like 6 to 8 weeks from like when you have an idea for a beer?
For one that we think we're going to produce and get in.
But then there's like the label creation. So I've got to kick it to Julie and then our graphic designer, and then she and I go back and forth, and we're working on a Mexican lager right now. So she and I have been back and forth. I'm like, I want an owl with a third eye, because I have some weird thing with third eye things. I'm pointing at one of my tattoos. Sure. And so it's like, oh, can you make it like a salt packet, not a salt shaker in the owl's claw? Or, like she and I go back and forth on that kind of crap. And I'm like, oh, more blue there, less green, whatever. Then I have to get the files. She preps the files. I send them to our label making company, and then there's a back and forth of proofing on that. And if we're going to send the beer to Minnesota,
we have to submit it to the federal government for approval. But
then it has to be printed first. But if it needs to be changed because the feds don't like it, then so you can release it in Minnesota or in Wisconsin without federal approval, but not to Minnesota. So there's that dance we got to do too.
And then maybe it's more detailed than you care, but the beer itself, the brewing process is a day of taking these malts, converting the starches to sugar, and that's brewing is what you're doing in the water there. You create this wort, you add yeast to it. So a lot of brewing is just farming. We're making the best environment for yeast to live out their lives. So you throw the wort in a tank, you add the little yeast creatures to do their thing, and that's what takes a couple weeks. We drop them out, we filter them out, we clean the beer up, we move it to another tank, carbonate it, and then package it in whatever form we're going to do.
Do you guys like have it as a keg on tap to like have people try before you go through all that type of a process in the brewery, or does it go straight to bottle?
Go straight to can, but now that we've got a pilot system in house, there's going to be a little bit more of that R&D.
And a lot of the beers we made originally weren't canned. The ones we canned, we had a very good idea of how that flavor profile was going to come out. We put a lot more meticulous care into writing the recipe and really thinking about it or trying the ingredients. So there was a good amount of R&D with a lot of the ones that get canned versus things that are just going to get thrown in kegs and you can sell in the tap room. There's a little more room for trial and error with those.
Yeah, I was going to say also, like, a brew day is 6 to 8 hours of hurry up and wait and also cleaning.
Sure, distribution thing. So a lot of people don't understand, or I guess for me, my clientele are really young, for the most part. So they think when they give me $60 for a skateboard deck that I just made $60. I'm like, well, no. I don't make $60 on this. And they don't understand when I'm like, profit margins aren't good on hard goods, because they aren't. So like a skateboard deck, say like first it has to, like the wood shop has to, get the wood. Then the company orders, this board. So they have to have these heat transfers. They're like the graphics made. Those are made, they're sent, then they get pressed onto the boards themselves. Then they get shipped over to the company. Now the distribution company has to try to double their profit margin, hopefully, if they can, by selling it to me. And then I have to try to double it, which I definitely don't get to double it, unfortunately, on that. And that's kind of like how the process goes for pricing. I've always wondered this because, like, obviously a microbrew is going to cost more, like per bottle. It's just going to, because like you're not streamlining and just whatever quantity always brings down the price. So what was like a 6-pack on average cost from you guys? Like $10, $9?
Yeah, we try to keep it around $10.
Okay, cool. So $10. So where does the price go? Because when you distribute yourself, that's you make the higher profit margin, I assume, right? But you go through distributor, then they can hit different people. How does like the price get determined?
So you've got if we're saying a can of beer, because that's a little easier to talk about, because bars are, you got variable amount of pours in a keg, and they get a little bigger chunk. But if you're looking at a can, depending on your market, you kind of got a little unique one with what Woodman's is doing in that market. But you're looking at 8 to 12% markup to the retailer themselves. And then the distributor, who's actually doing a lot of that grunt work of picking up the beer from our place, getting it, making sure it's stocked, doing a lot of the ground sales.
Well, printing shelf talkers,
they're getting about a third. So anything else is us, but we're the ones paying the tax and the cost and actually producing the goods. So we've got to look at what we get gross versus that, and then live on those margins.
We pay a lot of taxes.
Yeah. Well, that's what people don't understand is, and that's what's really tough, right? Is you can look at huge companies like Oakley or Nike or somebody, and because they only have however many models and they just mass produce them so incredibly, you can look at those profit margins and it's like, whoa, they make 9 times as much. They cost $10 to make and they sell them for 90. And then you look at things like skateboards or like beer, and it's like, I kind of got I have to sell a lot to actually make money. It's not, you don't make as much money as you think you do. And it's kind of crazy that like something that's on such a smaller scale that you guys put so much energy is still only $10 versus like a Coors or whatever 6-pack being whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like the price difference for how much is being put into it with the labels and with all that stuff. If you were to look at like designer clothing or something, normally the price would be astronomically more. The fact that you guys have to try to compete on a price level when realistically it's not on the same playing field. I'm just glad that people appreciate microbrews as much as they do. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, like it would be so difficult to do, I think.
And I think people understand how big places like the Bud and the Coors and those places are, but I don't know if it's fully appreciated that if they truly wanted to, if they actually cared enough about craft beer or felt it was that threatening, they could wipe the entire industry out in a week and not even blink an eye.
That's what we were talking about yesterday with seltzers. Like if Budweiser wants seltzer to go away, they'll just make it go away.
Yeah, and we're not exaggerating.
No.
It's they would either just buy up everything or run or tell the distributors you can't do this and you got to run everyone else out, and they could.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of, I guess, interesting living on the margins of that kind of constant threat. It's not going to happen. There's other reasons it wouldn't, but they have the capacity to do that, and I just don't think the average, more than the average consumer, doesn't realize that.
Yeah, people don't think about, unfortunately, like the term, the saying is thrown around that you vote with your dollar, but I don't think people think about it as much as like people like us do, because we realize how important that individual dollar is. You look at people, and of course, when you own something like a brewery, I'm sure all of your friends always ask for discounts and stuff all the time, which is like a little bit difficult. But it's like people won't bat an eye when they go and buy something they're used to buying, say like a case of Miller Lite or something. They don't even bat an eye about just buying it. They're just like, oh, it just costs us much, no big deal. But for some reason, it's a lot harder for them to pull the trigger on something smaller. You know what I mean? Like on a different brand they're not as familiar with or whatever. For some reason, it's a lot harder to convince people that, hey, this is just worth this much money. There shouldn't even be a question. Mm-hmm. I think it's because maybe it's the brand recognition or whatever. We're getting relatively close to the end of the show. I do have a few more things to ask. One, do you want to plug and talk about it a little bit? Because I know people are going to listen to this and they're like, you guys have way better voices than me. I want to listen to you guys talk more. And I know you guys do have a podcast and are involved in that world. Do you guys want to touch on what that is at all?
Yeah, for sure. So I am affiliated with a podcast studio called Blind Ninja Studios, and on that network there are several shows. Homebrew Bound is one of them. It's a homebrew show that I do, and I do the homebrew show more to keep my head in the game of actual brewing, because I haven't probably brewed a beer in like 3 years, I think. And then we do the Hop Barrel Happy Hour. So with the Hop and Barrel Happy Hour is just simply news and information about the brewery for a 2-week period, and that's it. Like I always say, I like the inner workings of things, and so for me, if there's a brewery that I really like, like if Bad Weather did a podcast, I would be listening to it and to see what Andy Ruland has to say. Or
we've had a couple guests. We're trying to not have brewers necessarily. Nothing against brewers, but you get a lot of those on podcasts.
Well,
so
we invited our distributor partner to be on because I frankly don't think people understand how beer distributors work at all and how big of a role they play. And so to see the inner workings of that, we thought would be kind of neat. So,
and we've got a local musician and friend of ours, Zeb, coming on the next one, just because honestly, it's fun to hang out and talk to him for a while.
We'll probably end up getting beers before or after, and
he plays. That's all that one is.
I mean, podcasts are a great way to just like build community. You know what I mean? Like, in that, I think in that sense, that's like a platform to be able to do that. Feature these people now; they're more invested. The people that follow them are more invested. It just kind of like helps out with everybody. In order to find it, what's the easiest way for people to find that?
Just look up the Hop and Barrel Happy Hour on Spotify. Or
Spotify, we're on, pretty much if you just search for it the way you would normally search for podcasts.
Yeah, I found it right away. Like, no big deal when you just search it. And I listen to the distributor one. I really like that. I listen to this podcast called The Nine Club. That's like a skateboarding one. And what's really cool is they have people from all the different areas of the industry. They have pro skateboarders a lot, but then they'll have photographers, or they'll have designers and stuff. And you can kind of hear, because I'm a big skateboard nerd, I want to hear that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's nice that that's available. I always ask on the show, when you work for yourself, you have all these like really unique experiences because you don't work a regular 9 to 5. So you don't get excited and like stoked about like this random promotion or client or whatever. You tend to have like a lot of really unique stories that come up, like just really different things. So if you can pick one unique experience, like a specific one, not just saying, hey, I traveled a lot, but something specific that you're really grateful for that only happened because you chose to pursue your passion for beer, what is it?
I definitely have an answer for this. It's something I'm waiting to come back. It's actually kind of funny. Another podcast, live music show called Take It With You in Duluth. You could look that up and find it too, but it's this just amazing group of artistic and talented individuals who do an old-fashioned live radio show in the form of a podcast. And there's 6 seasons. They didn't do one because of COVID, and no one's sure when they're coming back. But we literally fell into it because I was in Duluth doing beer sales, and Molly I mentioned before was like, hey, if you're in town tonight, you should come to this podcast. The Bent Paddle Brewing sponsors it and they keep it going. And ended up hanging out with a bunch of them, going to this thing, which was blown away. It was one of the best artistic experiences of my life. And then we started going, Brian started coming up, and we went to almost the entire we did make the entire last season, and we were going to get season tickets this next year. But that experience alone is just something I never would have expected, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have one to share?
I'm at a loss, but I'll piggyback on Justin's. I think that, kind of inundating ourselves into Duluth and learning kind of the local culture, and it's very there's a lot of like really cool music and art going on up there, man, in like a very small area. And so to get to experience that, and going to that podcast is always for me anyway, an emotional experience. It's some very heartfelt, it's very funny, very sad, very emotional to see this live podcast. And so I would agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of really crazy stories that I could tell, but probably shouldn't. So,
or drinking story, the Red Room.
Yeah. What?
The Red Room.
Oh yeah. Well, that's my whole life. When someone's like, don't go there, don't go to that bar, don't go to that neighborhood, I'm like, no, we're going there.
Sure.
So they were like, don't go to the red carpet in St. Cloud. And we're like, no, we're going there right now.
Perfect. Okay, well, we all make mistakes, right? Like, and you invest in the wrong things or whatever. Like I was talking about, like sometimes people bite off more than they can chew with like growth. That's when you personally grow as business owners and entrepreneurs, is when you make a mistake and you're like, oh shit, now I'm not going to make that again. Hopefully you happen to make those mistakes early where like the consequences are a little smaller. So that way now you've wisened up and you don't make those later. Can you tell me about a mistake that you made, something that you learned a lesson from that maybe somebody listening could benefit from?
We talked a little bit about it before. It was don't expand too fast, or don't try to reach an area that, like distributing to Madison. That was a total mistake.
Actually,
there's no way we can support that. Nobody wants to drive 4 hours somewhere every day to try to support the
Did you
market.
hire somebody to try to go do that, or
Yeah,
what was
we
that about?
did.
We stuck it out longer than we should have.
Yeah.
We did it on our own. We had a sales rep, Jeremy Reese at the time, who now works for Surly, would take trips down there in the van or his truck.
Yeah.
And it
and then Joe Elkin, when he was when he was kind of transitioning between here and Chicago, and then you realize, oh crap, we got a bunch of kegs down there. And we literally had someone hit us up very recently, like, hey, you got a bunch of kegs here in Madison still. And we were like, oh man.
Yeah. I think the Madison mistake, and it's a great market. We love the people, and we learned a lot about the accounts down there in Someday, but it's a perfect example of expanding too fast and just copying what places around us were doing in a different way. And we shouldn't have done that at that point.
The only other total nightmare I can think of is when we had the exploding cans.
Oh yeah, this is an R&D thing, but
Yeah.
Lemon Breaker. The first year, this was before we were with the distributor. We had, you mix sugar in with beer, and it's truly a shandy what we make. It's not like a flavor additive, like I won't name other shandies, but it's what a lot do. In our case, we actually make it authentically, but you're adding sugar back to a fermented alcohol.
Well, there's still yeast, even if you filter, even if you find. Even if you centrifuge, there's going to be some yeast.
So we had a few exploding cans that first year that probably hurt the brand a little, and definitely made some of the people who carry the beer physically gun shy.
Yes,
Lost a couple accounts right away,
Yeah.
but we figured that out. That has not been a problem for 2 years now, and but that was a mistake of rushing into something before you do your research, and we actually did think we'd product tested, but not well enough.
Yeah, I mean, we have a full-on microbiology lab here, which that's another thing. Do the R&D if you're going to start a brewery. Do tons of R&D. Also, make sure you spend the money up front to outfit your brewery with a lab. Just do it.
You won't find the money once you've started.
No,
once
you'll
you'll
keep putting it off. It's
Yeah. Well, yeah. In general, I think things are rushed. Not only growth, but people rush things way too fast. I've tried to explain this to people with the show. Some people have asked me, like, "Hey, how did you get it to work?" Or why did it work so fast? I'm like, well, the biggest reason my show worked, for one, at first I'm interviewing entrepreneurs, and I'm already was a relatively established entrepreneur, so I had a background knowledge, and people that I'm asking had some kind of mutual respect where they're like, "Yeah, I'll give you my time. You know what I mean, to do this." I could relate to them. I did the whole 10 episode season before putting anything out. I was like, I'm going to record all of this, go back and edit it, make sure this is what I want before I put anything out. Because I know the first time somebody listens, if it's garbage, they're just not going to want to look at it again. And I think that is something that's it's so hard to have patience. You just want that instant gratification, but it will go over so much better if you just whatever date you were going to pick, just push it back one more month. Give yourself one more month to try to work it. Sometimes you can't, right? Because you need to get the brewery open because the overhead's crazy. But in general, with people's projects and stuff, albums or anything else, it's
I was going to say
time.
What you're saying is exactly like most musicians. How many people talk about, they're an overnight success? Well, just because you heard them now doesn't mean you can ignore the last 10 years where they've been playing dive bars and practicing and working on albums with other bands.
That's the best, the Pantera example. Everyone's like, oh, overnight they were. It's like, no, they've been on the road for 8 years. This is not overnight. You seeing this happen looks like overnight, but it's not.
Right. Well, so we made it through all these nights. So coming up, what's next for Hop Barrel? Besides, we're obviously going to do some cool shit. You guys are going to keep expanding, which is going to be dope. You're going to maybe not get back into Madison, but we'll just move towards we'll move towards Eau Claire and expand a little bit into more of Wisconsin, so people remember you're from Wisconsin, not Minnesota. But what's coming up? When people follow you, what are they going to see?
I think the two big things we have are, on the cool creative side, it's going to be our pilot batch system. It's a much smaller brew house we have in the back that's going to let us do really creative, wacky stuff and not have to worry about how do we move all this beer through a distributor on our own. We can do collabs and really get funky with it. So that's going to be fun to unleash. And then the other is kind of from the exact opposite side, going a little more corporate and getting into kind of the 12-pack game. We have a variety pack out now, and our, the popular beer Lemon Breaker is going to be in a 12-pack, and we're playing with a few other formats that way to kind of hit that consumer that's looking for that type of product. And that's
I mean, from my standpoint, I'm still an avid beer drinker, and I almost always go for the 12-pack especially if there's an IPA variety pack. So we're really trying to push that, and I think that'll probably move to our biggest sellers. But I'm really excited about that.
Dope. I make sure that I ask this because I didn't earlier on in seasons. People listen to the show and they're like, I really like these people. Obviously, you can go buy a 6-pack or these 12-packs that are coming up. But sometimes it's not necessarily just money. There's like other ways people can support you. For me, I like to tell people, dude, like if you share something like that's helpful, or if you send me a DM and say, hey, I listened to this episode and I really liked it, that just puts me in a good mood. So that supports me. How can people best support you guys?
Hit us up, kind of like we started. Hit us up on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
We've brought that one in house where you and I are actually running the Instagram account now.
We like running the social media.
Yeah.
I think it's fun. We kind of tag team it and
engage with us there. Hit us up with ideas. That's awesome. We love that and kind of
I never get upset about people DMing. You were talking about this on your episode with
Cashanova?
Nope. The gal.
Leighton.
Yes.
Yeah, Leighton Hugard.
And you said something like, if I want to ask some person a question, I'll just DM them. And I do the same thing. And I'm shocked at who will answer you back. Like Seth Rogen, like he was just like, yeah, haha, about something I said. And I was like, oh, Seth Rogen just answered me on Instagram. Like, okay. And we get a lot of listener mail for the podcast. And I love getting those messages. I always respond. It's a lot of fun. So if you guys ever have, the listeners have weird questions about beer or, anything, hit us up.
Dude, yeah. I mean, how cool is it that you can buy a 6-pack from Woodman's or whatever and be sipping on it and be like, this beer's trash. I'm going to DM these guys. Yeah. Or hopefully you're like, this beer's so good. And then take a stupid selfie drinking this beer and send it to them. I'm sure it'll make
at
these
least
guys
on
think.
Instagram, you'll get right to us.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally. Do you guys have any other last words? Otherwise, thank you for coming on the show.
No, thanks for coming out.
Yeah, man.
It's
Thanks
awesome.
for coming out here.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.